last time the Virginia Theater was this full for a movie was Ebertfest. This festival has been the result of months of unremitting labor by lots of university and Champaign-Urbana volunteers. And we want to acknowledge some of them right now. To begin with, I hope that if you can hear me, the volunteers who have been ushering and helping out here at the Virginia, if you can kind of position yourselves, we're going to have you march down the aisle like the waiters on a cruise ship when they bring in the baked Alaska, so that everybody can applaud you. I want to bring out my wife, Chaz Handelsmith Ebert.
Wonderful time. We go to film festivals all over, but I tell you, I've had the best time here at Urbana Champaign.
Now there are, I don't know if everybody want to introduce and thank exactly here, but is Mayor McCollum here, Don McCollum? He was here last night and gave me the key to the city. The key to the cities.
He wants it back.
Born in Urbana, so I know it's plural. Tim Watso will be here later and has been here right along. He is involved in the award ceremony going on over on campus right at this moment. The producer of the festival is a woman who has been averaging 9.5 minutes of sleep for the last 4 months. She has made so many countless arrangements. Our gratitude to her is boundless, and her name is Nancy Casey.
First ever College of Communications Crystal Award that says to Roger Ebert with our gratitude and deep appreciation for the first Roger Ebert's Overlook Film Festival from your friends in the College of Communications. Thank you.
Alumni of the University of Illinois, and when I found out about this, I said I'd be more than happy to come back and volunteer, and it's been a great time. And we like to give these flowers. This is Ebert on behalf of all the volunteers. I love that picture flag that shows Gregory Hall on it, which figures heavily in that dream that all college graduates have. Oh my God, it's 9 o'clock and I forgot the hourly was at 8. I studied for it. How did I forget it? The person who has dealt with all the film logistics and guest logistics, the directors, producers, and stars who have come in, including the David Warner, the great star who is going to be here after Tron, and Steve Lisberger, the pioneering director who made this seminal movie, and all the other guests that we've had all week, starting with Heather Rose, who was our opening screening guest in one of the most dramatic moments one could imagine. The person who has made those arrangements, who has been tracking down the prints, who has been providing advice and counsel and input, is Nate Cohen, who was at the University of Illinois until just a year ago and is now at the University of Georgia. Nate, I want to thank you for the director of the festival.
Roger, who has put in an incredible amount of time, attended every screening, every panel, every reception, and has responded positively to every interview request that he's had. And I think we should give Roger a big hand for that.
WPTU at 8 a.m. It has a different call letters, but I always think of it as WPTU because that's what it was called when they fired me. I'd also like to thank some other people who worked on the festival. I can't read my handwriting here, but I remember them. Anyway, Nikki Dalton and Lisa Wilson and you guys who come out here. And John Eby, who is the manager of the Virginia Theater. And Brian Shirk, who has been hovering about us for the last 3 days, helping us with every single thing. If any of you are here, please come out and stand up here and wave and be applauded. This is Brian here. Two friends without whom this festival would have literally been impossible because they are the projectionists. Steve Krause is the projectionist in the professional screening room in Chicago where we critics see 90% of the movies. And James Bond, who is his associate, is one of the ace projectionists in the entire country, and the two of them together were able to assure us that every single film was in the right ratio and it was on the money and it started on time and it looked great. Steve and James. Robert Baird designed the website. He's also on one of our panels. I think he's here. Is he here? He's right down here, Robert Baird. Ebertfest.com. And everything else I have written down here is going to happen afterwards, except for one thing. It's kind of like a reunion in a way. We've gotten some suggestions on how to improve it. We're no longer, next year, going to penalize the people who wait for the Q&A by making them go to the end of the line. Instead, we're going to have a new system where because that means you're going to 2 movies, you get rewarded instead of penalized. Then we have a couple other plans, like maybe have buckets for the popcorn instead of paper bags. And, so we're going to get this perfect. I mean, I'm talking as if there's going to be another festival.
When Roger and I got married, he loves movies so much, and I was very fortunate that I loved movies almost as much as he does. Because in our wedding vows, I had to promise to love and obey him through, and cherish him, not obey, through good movies and bad movies. And fortunately, I've seen my share of good movies with him, and especially at this festival. And I was so happy that he shared his hometown with me because I know he still has a big emotional tie to here. And in fact, once when we were here, I had him knock on the door where he grew up and ask if he could see the house. And you wouldn't believe it, but down in the basement of the house, they still had letters that Roger put up when he was a little boy on the light switches that spelled out Ebert. But the one thing that I want to do today is Roger is always giving other movies or things or people a thumbs up. Will you join me in giving my husband a big thumbs up? I was going to say it feels a little bit like a reunion. That got me onto the idea of people going out and coming back in again because I've seen some of you almost every screening and met some of you. And one thing they always do at a high school reunion
give prizes to those who came the greatest distance. So I have 2 copies of the movie yearbook here. One for the international guests who came the greatest distance. Not invited. Heather Rose doesn't qualify, because she already has the book. From outside the United States, give me a bid.
Sydney, Australia.
Nice, Ed.
Anybody out to Sydney, Australia?
Is that a student though?
You don't have to be a student, you just have to be from Sydney, Australia. Okay, what's your name?
Leah Curtis. That's her name.
Leah Curtis, that's her name. Okay, I'm not going to make you come down to the balcony. I have this book for you. You can get it afterwards. Who came to the greatest distance within the continental United States? Philadelphia? Hawaii? Did you come from Hawaii? Pardon? Is that you? Where is he? He's not here, he can't win. Where is he? Bronx?
Salem, Oregon.
Salem, Oregon? Boston, I think Salem, and somebody said Portland, right? Okay, is Portland or Salem further away? We were working on that during the screening. To repeat, before this movie, something I had said before about the movie at other events during the festival. When we called it the Overlook Festival, it wasn't just films. Some films were overlooked because they didn't have North American distribution. For example, Hamson, that we started out today with today. Other films overlooked because, at least in my view, they never received the audience that they deserved. The admiration they deserved. And people came back to the French film we just saw, and they were saying, I love that movie. Why don't movies like that play more often? Well, a lot of them do play at the art theater, but a lot of them don't play very widely. And so that was the second category of overlooked. And the third category is overlooked formats. And that included the silent film Battleship Potemkin that played yesterday with Concrete, the orchestra. And they're all still here. And, also played Tron, which is a 70mm film, and 70mm, which is much larger than 35mm, more than twice as large, as I remember from my high school geometry class. Because if it's twice as large, it's 4 times as high, or something like that. Mrs. Dollar would be an anime for nothing more than that. But it's much larger. And gives you so much more richness and detail, and yet we seem to be running headlong toward cheaper and easier ways to deliver pictures to the screen instead of better ways. So that 70mm is the threatened format. And Tron, I looked at a list of all the movies that had been shot in 70mm. My eye fell immediately on Tron because I gave this movie 4 stars in the paper when it came out. I thought it was incredibly creative and exciting. And it was not overlooked at the box office, it was a hit at the box office. But its format was overlooked. And also what's overlooked today, with all of the excitement about computer-generated animation and Star Wars and Starship Troopers and all of the other movies that are being made, Matrix and so forth, is that this movie started it all. In fact, Larry Smarr, the head of the National Center for Supercomputer Applications, was telling me in a conversation yesterday, this was the first movie that most people saw that gave them a visual notion of what a chip in a computer looked like. It gave them the visual vocabulary for thinking about computers as something other than a magic box with a little man inside with a very tiny typewriter. And so this film was a seminal film. And the studio, Disney, was thrilled that we invited it. They offered their cooperation. And then they discovered, amazingly, they didn't have a 70mm print. So at that point, we were all ready to roll with Tron anyway. It was our choice, and it was a good match with Champaign because of the Supercomputer Center. And so we decided to show it in what is said to be a wonderfully restored and fresh and sparkling 35mm print that will, you see, symbolize how overlooked 70mm is. So after the film, we're going to have the director and the star here on stage for a Q&A, and I hope you enjoy Tron. Thank you. I don't know if I need to introduce David Warner and Steve Lisberger, but I just have. Whoa, this movie plays, doesn't it? I mean, it's amazing.
You did a great job up in the projection booth.
Really?
Real 3A was a problem, and they fixed it. So, but his name's James Bond. So. We live in a fool's paradise down here on the ground floor. We are the programs, not the users. And as you told me, Reel 3A was too dark, and they cranked it up till the projector was ready to explode and save the screen. And I felt like the action in the projection booth was almost. David, how did it feel to see this film again after several years?
Yeah, I haven't seen the film for since it was really released the first time. Rather like Roger Ebert, I had to sit through all my movies, you know, five, and it was really extraordinary. It was, I still didn't understand it.
You had to be 13.
That's true. What does D-res mean?
I'm 13, as a 13-year-old. Some of the words made it through and they became part of the vernacular, and a lot of them didn't. But I want to clear something up, which is that cyberspace as a word existed before this picture came out. And at one time we talked about titling the picture cyberspace, but at the time we thought the word was already too passé.
At the time this movie came out, the average user would have been using what? An Apple II, a Candy?
The computer department gave you those numbers the other day, but to tell you the truth, I can't remember.
Is this 1982? Is the
79.
79?
Yeah. When it was released in 81, but when we started figuring these things out, I kept promising the people that there would be scenes that we would still do, because the computer guys they wanted to do the impossible. So we had to promise them one scene that was impossible if they got all the other scenes done. And then they got all the other scenes done, and they said, now we want to do the impossible scene, and we were somehow out of time.
But if this movie was actually, if I can remember back, the state of the art for computer games at that point was Pong, and its clones, and you essentially, essentially, I guess this was Larry Smarr was getting at the other day on the panel. The visuals in this movie were unbelievably influential in pointing the way toward what both movie representations and video game representations of cyberspace would look like in the years to come. In other words, what we saw on the screen did not draw from pre-existing visuals, did it?
Well, that's true. We had a motto: if you have lemons, make lemonade. And at the time, it was impossible to even think about trying to do reality, to mimic reality. So I thought what I'd do is I'm going to stay here in Champaign, Urbana, and keep working on this film, and we'll eventually get it to look real. I'll use the computer lab.
Would it want to look real?
No.
Or isn't it better to look stylized?
It's better this way, I think. I mean, I used to think that eventually it wouldn't look this it's still too far out. And now I've come to the conclusion that there is never going to be another film that will look like this. And that's its strength, and of course that's part of its flaw, that it was so experimental. But we used to tell the Disney executives, yes, it's fine, it's coming along great, and then we'd shut the door 5 minutes and say, oh my God.
David, what are some of your memories of first meeting Steve and being presented with the role and being presented also with the notion that your performance would take place in a different kind of visual context than most movie performances?
Well, to begin with, when my agent called me and said there's a movie called Tron, and it's something like, before I said, who's directing it? And he said, Steven Lisberger. And I said, Steven Spielberg, I'll do it.
David told me that the other day. It was the first time I had heard that from him. I'm sure some of you came here tonight thinking I was Spielberg. But I had never told him this, which is, David said that there was another actor who's well known who was up for his part, but he won it. And that actor was Peter O'Toole. But what I never told you is that Peter O'Toole turned down the part that you got because he was holding out to play Tron. And we had this ridiculous meeting at the Ballet Hotel where Peter O'Toole was jumping back and forth between 2 beds in his hotel room. And he was screaming, on my tombstone there will be 2 titles, Lawrence of Arabia and Tron.
And instead it's Tron and Babylon 5.
It's a tombstone that still has some spaces left on it. David, how old was Steve when you met him?
Oh my goodness, how old was Steve?
13. No,
Really? I was
28.
28. And this was your first film.
That's the really scary part.
This is the first film by a 28-year-old kid.
It's been 20 years, and every film I think that goes through this kind of film that's experimental it reaches a time when it needs someone who really understands it and champions it. And what Roger has done for this film by doing this festival, it's really significant. I mean, this film was waiting for Roger to do this, and he has done it.
Everybody was ready to see it too. We sold out.
It hasn't. They told me it hasn't been this full since Randy.
Actually, it hasn't been this full since 2001, which we sold out a couple of years ago. David, he called you in. You interviewed for the role. Did you understand the visuals at that? Did he understand the visuals at that time?
You asked me how old he is, which I don't know. I have no idea. He obviously understood the visuals. I mean, there was no way by reading the script what this extraordinary film was going to look like. You know, 17 years ago, there was no way for an actor reading the script how it was going to look. There were 2 or 3 photographs and representations that were shown. And I don't think I could actually interview for the role. I think it was a direct offer, as they say, which is really rather nice. There was just no way, and I don't know the technical way of doing how it works, but the actors were basically on a black set, wearing the white leotard costumes with all the stuff on it, which was later done. It was done. Oh, by the way, actors get perks when they do a movie. Some get cars and things. And Stephen, I'd like to thank you for letting me have the costume.
So many people have parts of costumes and stuff. I don't have any of that. I don't know where it all disappeared to.
I was joking, actually.
When you read the script, how would it describe a typical action that you would be performing in words? What would you read on the page that would translate into something that we would see happening here?
Well, again, would be written in a way, in a language which, quite honestly, and I'm not being facetious or trying to be funny, in a way sometimes that I didn't really understand, in a kind of way. So really, I mean, and as I said, we were on the blank set, and there was no furniture, there were no couches to sit on, like maybe in an ordinary movie. We had marks and lines, and I know Stephen would say exactly what sometimes he had to do for the actors to get the correct focus on whatever he wanted. I had no idea, and it stunned me again watching it for the second time tonight. What? I mean, it is totally indescribable in words what this movie was going to look like. Totally. It's something that I have never seen or experienced before.
I'm trying to imagine standing on a blank set, because everything was going to be done later. The back projection, or this is not back projection, this is, we're going to get right to that next, but you're wearing a costume, you're on a sound stage, where you're told what your character is doing, and then they photograph it, and you say, thank you very much, Mr. Warner, we're finished with you today. And then you saw this movie, and it must have been, whoa, because everything else was added.
Absolutely. As I say, we were in a black room, and this is what you guys see. It was for an actor, you know, when you make an ordinary movie, I mean, that's a challenge in itself. It was really very exciting to actually be part of it, because we had the frisbees I loved, I remember that.
I'm proud of the frisbees because this is probably the last big studio action adventure picture that will ever be made that doesn't have a gun in it. I've made a couple of movies since this picture, and I have not been able to keep the guns out. And it's almost impossible.
Can you describe for us what process you went through along with your collaborators to, first of all, to decide to make a movie that takes place inside a computer memory board or chip? I don't know exactly. It seems awfully big to just be one chip, but then again, chips have a lot of stuff in them. It's real small, so it's down there, anywhere, somewhere inside. Where did you get the idea to set up an adventure inside a computer, and how did you, at a very early stage, when you're sitting around in a room probably with drawing pads and sketchbooks at least, conceive the visualization of it?
Well, my background, a lot of it was in animation. And if you look at the animated films, Disney's clever about this. They look for areas that they can send their army of artists into that really haven't been pictured before or in a long time. And even things like Pocahontas, we hadn't seen much Native American animation. And the artists get excited if they can get to an area first. And so I think, and I had a company with a lot of creative people, a lot of them were animators, we made live action and animation. But I guess I picked up on the sense that here was a new dimension, a new space, cyberspace. And if one got to it first, one could have the creative thrill of trying to capture it. And it was amazing how much energy that process generated, how we still talk about it, how excited everybody was to be working on that. We really felt like pioneers. But we had picked up that energy from the people who were really pioneering cyberspace. And they were brave and really smart, and they were crazy, and they were an inspiration, these guys.
If you study the credits very carefully, you see names that have been associated in high-profile movies for the next 20 years. It's like this was the training academy for a whole genre.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's too bad, is that this group of people only got to make, one movie together. And then everybody went in different directions, and a lot of talent was together for one time, all these people. And they've gone on to direct Lion King and Toy Story, and work with other directors. I think there's 10 or 12 people that have become directors who worked on this picture. So it was an amazing time.
David, on a couple of the panels, especially the one on computers yesterday, there was some discussion about the theory that performances can be animated. You know, this business of taking, basically what happened to Jeff Bridges in this film. They would kind of put you on a grid, feed you into the computer, give you your lines and movements, and say, thank you very much, you can go home. The computer will do your performance for you. It is, and we've seen, for example, Fred Astaire's Dustbuster commercial, which I think is obscene. This is an interesting combination of the human and special effects. It is you, it is your face, your voice, your body, your movements, your body language. That's fine with me. But it seems to me that the human and is one thing, special effects are another thing. As an actor, how do you feel about that? How would you feel about essentially your gift being used in your absence?
He doesn't like it.
Because, I mean, we have a technology that makes movies.
Oh, yeah,
We
yes.
have flesh and blood that makes performances. And there are different ways they can interact, and some of them I think are probably not a good idea.
Well, I mean, I don't want to get too heavy, metaphysical, etc., but there are such things as soul and heart, you know, and those kind of things that I don't think can be recreated unless the audiences are conditioned to accept that in the future. I mean, I know, for example, on James Cameron used a lot of, this gridding thing, which I understand, and had recreated lots of figures on the Titanic deck and stuff like that, who weren't real people. Now, it's the question of the emotions, the feelings, and all those kind of things. Can they really be recreated? You can have something looking like me, speaking with my voice, because that's the way it can be programmed or whatever, but whether it'll ever get any kind of really deep feeling or being able to move people, that's a whole other thing. I mean, cartoons do exist. But the whole idea of, if they pay me enough and I'm too old, then maybe it'll be a nice pension, but I don't think this, I don't get facetious about this, but I know actors are concerned that one day they will be replaced, but by what? We don't know. Anything can happen.
The way I look at it is, you're an actor and I'm not. And so you can do things with your voice, your face, your body, that I can't do because you're good at it and I'm not good at it. The theory that an animator can do it works only if the animator is as good an actor as you are. Because otherwise he won't be able to do it no matter what tools he has. It can only be done by you. That's my theory anyway. Now we have 200 people walking around the deck of the Titanic from an overhead shot, and they're so small that they're, oh sure, we can make people walk up and down, but when it comes in for your close-up in that movie, where David of course had a major supporting role, it's gotta be you.
Well, yes, I hope so. I mean, I just don't I hope it is one of us, one of our departments, and the whole news isn't just taken over by all the other, or just one department. Well, they're trying to do away with so many departments nowadays, anyway, aren't they?
Yeah, the thing about actors and creative people is they make mistakes. They make flaws, and sometimes those flaws are the best thing that happens. And the computers tend not to make mistakes, and when they do make mistakes, people correct them. And that's the line. You have to have people that have the guts and the courage to go with the human element, which is uncertain, versus and I think that's one of the problems that we have with some of the contemporary studio pictures. Not that I want to get down on Hollywood, but because I'm actually very optimistic, but that there's a checklist now. We don't want to make this mistake, we don't want to make that mistake, we don't want to make this. It's a marketing approach to not making any mistakes. And if you do that to a creative process, in the end, you'll destroy it.
Can you give us a little background on some of the special effects that were used here. How did you achieve some of the things that we saw?
With a great deal of difficulty. The process was unique in that we took a live-action film and we treated it like an animated movie. We shot it in 70 millimeter, and then we had photographic blow-ups of every single frame in the computer world. And we had teams of people who then turned it into this electronic world, and then it was re-photographed in 70 millimeter. So it was divided up into 73,000 some frames that were painted and dealt with. So it's a strange combination of, in some ways, being a cut and paste sort of arts and crafts project, and then on the other hand, it was cutting edge. So I guess it was like the Mir space station.
Since we are paying tribute to 70 millimeter, could you also tell the audience, just describe the frame of 70 millimeter film as opposed to 35 millimeter film in terms of how it looks and what it carries in the way of information?
Well, it's large. It takes 4 times as much light to go from 16 millimeter up to 35 millimeter, and then 35 millimeter to 70 millimeters another 4 times. So it's, I explained this over at one of the other panels. One of the reasons that David Lean used 70 millimeter when he did Dr. Zhivago and Lawrence of Arabia with the same cameras we used is there was so much light in the desert and in all those snow scenes. And people have avoided trying to do more conventional films with interiors because it takes an enormous amount of light to fill that negative.
And how much more information can it put on the screen?
Well, that's probably the same multiple, so it's probably 4 to, at least 4 times.
You had another story about David Lean.
Yeah, I do have a David Lean story. I was at a screening at AFI, and I didn't know this was going to happen. It was the first screening of Passage to India. And I ended up sitting in the back row next to David Lean. They pushed me in the back row from one side and him from the other. I thought, oh my God, I'm sitting here next to David Lean for the screening. And AFI talked about the new projection system, completely new, that they put in. And the picture started to run on a Reel 3. Again, it's Reel 3, that's the problem. Reel 3, the sound went out. And there was no soundtrack. And I felt so bad for David Lean. And they had to turn the house lights on. And they said this is going to take a while. And it took 20 minutes before they could start the picture again. And I turned to David Lean and I thought if you're David Lean, this kind of monkey business is over. And David Lean looked at me and said, no, it never stops.
I was also thinking of the story about the camera that was used.
Oh, that we were looking, I'm sorry.
I'm glad you told the other story.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
But we kept looking for the sand from Lawrence of Arabia in the main A camera. But we couldn't find some.
You were using the same camera?
Yeah, that was the last camera. They said that the last time this camera had been used was on Lawrence of Arabia.
But there was no sand.
No, we never found any sand.
When this movie
Unless David got some.
When the movie was first screened at Disney, Michael Eisner was still an executive at Paramount, but he was at the screening.
Yeah.
And he told you something.
That was a strange screen because all the studio heads were there and they all stood on different sides of the room, sort of, in perfect symmetry and across from each other. And Michael Eisner is a very tall gentleman. I didn't know him. He came up to me and he said, well, you made a real piece of art in this film and now you're going to have to pay the price. And I'm not sure what he meant by that. I'm still living that. And then I bounced over to Lou Wasserman, who was the head of Universal, and Lou's wife had a pen. It said love in real large letters, as big as, almost as big as your fingers. Must have been about 150 diamonds, each one the size what love looks like. And he came up to me and he said, Steven Spielberg's a genius, and he walked away. Studio heads.
Let's go to the audience. We have microphones out there. To the microphone. We can't see it. They're disembodied voices. They're sort of like a master control program.
Oh, by the way, that was my voice. I realized, I remembered. I got like 3 roles in it.
You were master
He
control.
was talking to himself.
I didn't get paid anything.
I had a question for Mr. Lisberger. I was wondering if you saw any analogies between the Master Control Program and its artificial universe in your movie and the Matrix, and I'm not going to give anything away, but the artificial universe and that, and do you think they got had this in your movie?
Boy, I'm not sure you want to get me going on the Matrix. I admire what it took to get the Matrix done, and they're still. Those guys are really talented and they work really hard. And in some ways, they're paying me a compliment. So, but I have real problems with the Matrix. And it represents a sort of lack of idealism, which I understand, and it's the ultimate pragmatic solution to treat things the way they're treated in that film, and those are the times we live in. But if I don't get any idealism in that world, and if you just keep getting more and more pragmatic with these problems without any idealism, it gets really bleak. That's a cynicism. I mentioned this the other day. This is a really difficult time to live. I mean, we're making all sorts of transitions, and I sympathize and admire any young people who are getting through it. Because I don't think it's easy. I think it was a lot easier to get through the 60s and the 70s than it has been to get through the 80s and the 90s. But I think once you get through the millennium, it's going to get easier again. But though that movie reflects how difficult young people think life is.
I like Dark City a whole lot better than that.
Yes, I was looking at Fred's and I didn't see a good look from back here because I know you said some of the people involved in this went on to other stuff like Toy Story, Bugs Life. And was John Lasseter involved with this? Because I can't say I caught his name in credits.
There were a couple of people who were running around the halls of Disney, along with Snow White and all the squirrels and stuff. And Lasseter, and we were sort of the crazy guys down at the end of the hall. And some of the guys who were with the more established units wanted to jump in and get involved with all of this. In fact, a lot of the guys working on Tron had worked at Disney, and they quit. And they joined Tron when Tron was developed outside Disney. And then to everyone's surprise, Disney bought Tron. And all these people had to go back to Disney. But other people who were friends of theirs now wanted to find out what was going on with the film. And Lasseter had friends who he had worked at Disney with. So he used to hang out with them. So he wasn't an official whatever. He didn't have an official capacity, but he was involved. He did learn a lot about computer graphics through Tron being around.
For those who don't know, Lasseter was actually the key guy behind Toy Story.
Yeah. And one thing that's interesting about Toy Story is that I read that it takes about 13 years for an innovation to be accepted into the mainstream. And there was they mentioned Betamax, invented videotape, and how long it took before it got into the household. And they kept talking about this was in The Economist, and they kept talking about this 13-year lag. And that corporations are aware that you don't want to get in too early because 13 years is the right time. And it's exactly 13 years since the gap between Tron and Toy Story.
The first comment I'd like to make is, Roger, your commentary on Dark City was a great bonus, and I think it was wonderful.
You're referring, I'm just doing plugging for myself. You're referring to the commentary track I did for the DVD of Dark City. I hope.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you very much.